Welcome to the webinar on promoting equality, exploring India's uniform civil code in the context of minority rights. I'm Heman, Senior Research Associate at South Asia Research Institute for Minorities. Today, we embark on a journey of knowledge, empathy, and understanding as we delve into the issues faced by marginalized minority communities in India and the importance of uniform civil code that respects and upholds rights. SARIM is a non-profit organization dedicated to promoting the rights of minorities in South Asia. Our team comprises dedicated researchers, field experts, and passionate advocates who work tirelessly to raise awareness about the challenges faced by the marginalized communities in the region. Over the next few hours, we will have the privilege of hearing from some of the eminent speakers who have dedicated their lives to championing the cause of human rights and equality in the India. Each of them brings a unique perspective of the discussion, drawing their perspectives, experiences, and research and activism. Our speakers today are Khalda Parveen, social activist and general secretary at Amden Society, India. Anubhav Singh, Dalit activist and independent research from USA. Goldy M. George, Dalit human rights activist and social scientist from India. Leslie Martin, D. Dalit human rights activist from India. I believe together we can explore the idea of a uniform civil code, its implication for minority rights, and how it aligns with the principles of equality and justice. We believe that dialogue and understanding are vital to making the progress in promoting human rights and ensuring a brighter future for all. Our estimated speaker will share their insights, experiences, and research on the different aspects of uniform civil code and its impact on minority communities. Our first speaker, Anubhav Singh, a dedicated Dalit activist and independent researcher based in USA. Anubhav's work has contributed significantly to the discourse on minority rights and social justice. He will provide a global perspective on the Uniform Civil Code and its relevance in the promoting equality. Please, Anubhav, shed some light on this matter. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Heman, and good afternoon, everyone. So today we are here to talk about the Uniform Civil Code that the Prime Minister of India has recently spoken about once again. And first, I'd like to start with the history of the Uniform Civil Code, that is the UCC, and why it has been so much controversial. Of course, at the time of independence, which was in 1947, there was held a significant debate in the Constituent Assembly regarding the passage of the Uniform Civil Code and whether it should be adopted. So, the chairman of the drafting committee, Dr. Ambedkar, was of the opinion that a Uniform Civil Code was necessary for social justice and for integration of the country. However, there were other eminent members of the Indian National Congress who were opposed to this idea because the idea of a uniform civil code in essence clashed with Articles 25 to 28, and that is the right to religion, right to freedom of religion enshrined in the Constitution, and the right of minorities to manage their own cultural affairs. So it was a very close vote wherein it was decided that the Uniform Civil Code should be included within the directive principles of state policy and not be included under Part 3 of the Constitution, that is the fundamental rights enjoyed by all citizens of India. The reason Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was so in favor of UCC at the time was that the Hindu society at the time, particularly when it came to the rights of women, lagged significantly behind as far as I would say as far as the legal structure of the society was concerned as compared to both the Christian and the Muslim societies. So they did not have a right to divorce. They did not have a right to inherit property. Women also could be left. There was widow remarriage was a problem in the society. And particularly, also polygamy within the Hindu community was, by and large, practiced. So that is the reason that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was particularly, you know, interested in bringing forward a uniform civil code, because he felt it absolutely necessary to, channelize the legal aspect of the constitution towards empowerment of women. And at that point of time, the very same people today who are arguing in the favor of a uniform civil code, that is the RSS and some prominent Hindu nationalist members of the Indian National Congress, argued against having a uniform civil code, because they argued against the Hindu Code Bill, which Dr. Ambedkar brought in to reform the Hindu Personal Code of India, which granted the right to divorce to Indian women, particularly Hindu women, and also included the right for them to inherit property. Now, since there was a significant blowback against this, the bill had to be broken into 4 different codes, and it took a total of around 14 years for the bill to pass. And that too, a very, very diluted version of the bill was passed, wherein women did not enjoy the right to inherit property. In fact, that came in as late as recent as 2005 under the UPA government, when the Hindu Code Bill was amended. And very recently, just in 2020, the Indian Supreme Court has now ruled that women have an equal right to inherit ancestral property, removing further any ambiguities that have been entrenched in this process. So as we can see, that as far as even the Hindu society is concerned, it took until 2020 to get women rights to inherit property. So it is to argue that all personal law codes of India are just towards women would not be correct. Since recently, most of the discourse around universal civil code in India actually has been about granting Muslim women their due by the BJP. But as far as the RSS's thought process on the UCC has been concerned, it has always promised its supporters 3 things. One was the construction of the Ram Mandir, which was achieved through the Supreme Court judgment. Second was the abrogation of Article 370, which was done just after BJP was sworn in for a second time, and a uniform civil code to be implemented throughout the country, which essentially is now, it is the 3rd Hindutva project that we are seeing in progress, if indeed it does come to a uniform civil code being passed. Now, the uniform civil code is mentioned in Article 44 of the Indian Constitution, and it says that the state shall strive to promote a uniform civil code across the country. The reason why it was included in the directive principles of state policy was that the founding fathers, including Dr. Ambedkar, were of the opinion that because of India being a diverse and multicultural country, and of course that it had just been partitioned, it would not make sense to go ahead and with a law which would impede upon the religious and cultural rights of minorities. Because in their opinion, the society was not ready. And indeed, even as Dr. Ambedkar argued in the favor of a uniform civil code, he did also mention that any government who sought to do this through force upon India's minorities would bring itself not only a lot of trouble, but it could lead to a lot of strife within the country. So he was also of the opinion that if and when a uniform civil code was passed, the adherence to the code could be made voluntary. That is, it could be left to the citizens if they wanted to adopt the uniform civil code, or if they did not want to adapt the uniform civil code. So there are other directive principles of said policy, such as relating to health and equitable distribution of wealth, which is just been paid lip service, because this idea of a uniform civil code has somehow emerged as a stick to beat the minorities in India with. Also, it would be a mistake to argue that different codes exist in India because of because they are rooted in different religions. Rather, codes differ from state to state and region to region. That is why the the civil law, the civil code, or the civil laws were included in the concurrent list, meaning that both the state and the center could legislate on such issues whenever needed. So, secondly, I'd like to point out that the idea of a uniform civil code does not mean a common civil code. It doesn't mean common, because common means it would be equally applicable to everyone regardless of the context or the circumstances. The idea of uniform was actually derived from the idea that it would be applicable to everyone in the context of their religious and cultural backgrounds. Now, the problem in adapting the uniform civil code is that how do you bring together the different aspects or the different understandings of social institutions which exist within different religions or different codes. For example, marriage, as far as Muslims are concerned, is a contract. For Hindus and Christians, it is considered to be a sacrament. And apart from this, there are also regions of India, such as the Northeast, particularly Nagaland, which consists of a majority of Christians, that they were assured that the government of India would not interfere in their religious and cultural matters. So there is a specific provision in the constitution which forbids the central government interfering in their cultural matters. And considering what we have seen in Manipur happening recently, any such attempt to forcibly push down a uniform civil code in regions which are as sensitive as India's Northeast, as Nagaland or Mizoram or Manipur, would be catastrophic. It can be disastrous. A couple of years ago, there were riots across Nagaland because the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act actually stipulated that there should be 33% reservation for women in panchayat elections. And since that clashed with the customary law of Nagaland, that reservation was not implemented in Nagaland. So that proves that it is actually very, very difficult to enact a uniform civil code without involving the different regions, the different customary practices, the different ethnicities, as far as drafting a uniform civil code is concerned. Secondly, a uniform civil code may not necessarily lead to any, I would say, improvement in the conditions of women as far as Indian society is concerned, because it does not address the root causes of why the women in India have lagged behind on social parameters. For example, it does not address the root cause like poverty. It does not address root cause like the patriarchal culture, the patriarchal nature of Indian society. It does not address, the issues which are prevalent in the Special Marriage Act, which is said to be one of the few legislations that the Uniform Civil Code can be modeled on. And recently, the Supreme Court has also, voiced its opinion on some of the aspects of the Special Marriage Act. So, so even if seen through the lens of gender justice, a uniform civil code across India would not make much sense. And if anything, it is rather easier to amend the personal codes of, say, Muslims and Christians rather than, in a piecemeal manner, as Dr. Faizan Mustafa has argued in his article recently, rather than enacting a uniform civil code for all of India, which does nothing but imposes a particular view. Rather, I would go on to further argue a more or less Brahminical view of what social institutions should be all about. Uh, Going on, for example, one particular law that has often been praised has been the Uniform Civil Code, which exists in Goa. Now, that act was brought in by the Portuguese, and everyone who is a resident of Goa is actually governed by the Uniform Civil Code of Goa. But again, if you look at the Hindu Reform Bill of 1955-1956, that bill is not applicable to Goa, because then even the Hindus of Goa are governed by the Portuguese Family and Succession Act. Also, Shastric Hindu law on marriage, divorce, adoption, or joint family, it still remains valid, so as to argue. And even the state's Muslims are not governed by the law, by the Muslim personal law. Rather, they are also governed by the Portuguese law. So, and including the Special Marriage Act, which also has not found resonance in Goa. So, these are certain issues that, being a multicultural and a very, very, very multidimensional society and a very diverse society, that would have to be taken account if the thought process actually has to go forward with a uniform civil code. As of now, what the idea behind the Prime Minister mentioning the Uniform Civil Code seems to be more of a political ploy than any sincere attempt of bringing together the different law codes and rationalizing the civil laws as applicable to different groups in India. So, moving forward, I'd like to say that I see this nothing but just a mere as political ploy. And given that the previous Law Commission in its 2018 report had argued that it would be far easier to reform personal laws as far as gender justice is concerned, rather than pass an arbitrary uniform civil code. And I do think that passing a uniform civil code may actually end up violating India's basic structure doctrine put forward by the Constitution of India, because the Supreme Court of India has clearly said that the Indian Constitution is actually based on a balance between fundamental rights and the directive principles of state policy. So to give precedence to something like Uniform Civil Code at the expense of the religious and cultural rights of minorities in India may actually end up violating the basic structure doctrine of Indian Constitution. And this may very well end up being challenged on these grounds in the Indian Supreme Court. So it's entirely possible that the Supreme Court, in keeping with its argument that the balance between the directive principles of state policy and fundamental rights should not be disturbed, may choose to strike down the Uniform Civil Code if it does, see the light of the day, which, very frankly, I don't think it will. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anubhav, for speaking your mind out loud, and thank you for providing us with the insights of regarding the topic. Now we have the privilege of hearing from Goldy M. George, a distinguished Dalit human rights activist and social scientist from India. Goldy has been the forefront of advocating for the rights of marginalized communities and has extensively researched the impact of the Uniform Civil Code on Dalits. Mr. Goldy, please share your thoughts and experiences with us.
Uh, the outset, let me thank the organizing team at SARIM for inviting me to speak on this topic. Though I'm not very well versed and I've not been like very critically prepared like the previous speaker, I'll just try to speak out some of the ideas that strikes me. As as it's already known that uh, this uniform civil code is an attack on the secular democratic fabric of this country. I do not need to specify more or elaborate much on this. I understand that the fundamental premises where most of the people right now, not only in India but also across the world, understands this is that this is going to affect the minorities, particularly the Muslim minorities. I'm going to look at it from a different perspective. I want to look at it how Uniform Civil Code will strip the oppressed and marginalized sections of this country of all their constitutional protections and of all the rights and privileges that has been assured in the constitution. So we need to understand and that a functional democracy has a certain well-defined tenets of democracy. And at the moment, Uniform Civil Code is a critical agenda that has surfaced again in the Indian national discourse, not only in the Indian national discourse, but also it has in fact garnered a lot of international debates at the moment. Now, the underlying idea driving this agenda is premised on the cause of gender equality. Of course, an important issue of concern that needs critical attention. The idea of equality generally is embodied in the concept of citizenship, not only constitutionally, but also looking at various parallel paradigms at the international level. It is very much centered on the idea of citizenship. And now the idea of equality has two ways of looking at it. One refers to equality before the law or equal treatment to all before the law. Now, such a notion of equality does not necessarily lead to equality of opportunities because in a given society like India, which is inherently unequal because of its societal structures. Now, after all, individuals with the status of citizenship are not outside the communities. We need to understand that. May it be linguistics, may it be religious, may it be social, may it be cultural. And India basically, in a way, is the epitome of such an aspect. One thing we need to understand: India is not a homogeneous society with everyone speaking like same language or practicing the same religion or having a same tradition or customs as perhaps in the case of some European countries. Rather, India is diametrically opposite to it. That means there are different kind of languages, there are different kind of practices, there are different kind of faith, religious beliefs, customs, traditions. Everything is in fact different from one community to other community. And over and above, the communities are so located and it is marked off by certain structures of inequality in the sphere of social life, in the sphere of economic life, in political life, in demography, with implications for unequal relations among the individuals. So it is not a homogeneous community. it is diverse, it is heterogeneous. While some communities stand privileged, there are many who suffer disadvantages. For example, there are privileged groups like the upper caste in India, and there are the lower caste, the Dalits, the tribal, the Adivasis, and there are many backward classes who remain so badly disadvantaged. So there are the parameters of uniformity is actually, in fact, it is diminishing, to be honest. Now, having said this, I also want to bring in a similar point which was spoken by the previous speaker. The framers of Indian Constitution, they recognize diversity and its intricate interface with various aspects and dimensions of inequality. So they were acutely aware that society is marked by diverse aspects of linguistics, faith, religion, culture, and are hardly on the same plane, whether it is demographically or in other terms of looking at that development, or a combination of all of these. So they recognize that equality before law does not necessarily guarantee the equality of a level playing ground. So the level playing field, the level playing ground does not come simply because there is equality in constitutional terms. That has to be practically converted into the day-to-day life of the citizenship. It is with this end in mind that the Indian Constitution laid down protective provisions for certain groups and communities alongside fundamental rights, which you can list is that like the freedom, right to freedom, right to equality, right to justice for every citizen in this country. The most talked about such protective provisions has been the representative spaces given to scheduled castes and scheduled tribes through reservation in employment and through state-run educational institutions and also into political spaces. So there is a spatial question that you can see. The question of space is very much where does the question of space lie for the most oppressed and the most marginalized sections of this society. With the you can see that this is also being practiced and provided in the 73rd and 74th amendments of the Constitution in 1992. So such protective provisions has been very positive steps towards the realization of equality. But there are also protective provisions of other kinds which aims at safeguarding the identity and interests of religious, linguistic, and culturally disadvantaged groups that emanate from being numerically a minority. Now that's best illustrated in provisions under Article 29(1) and 31 meant for minorities, and also in Article 244(1) and 244(2 provided for the fifth and sixth schedule of the Constitution. And if you look at Article 371A and 371G, specifically meant for Nagaland and Mizoram respectively, you will see that these protections are well assured in the Constitution. Now, in such protective provisions, the state is hardly providing or taking any concrete measures, except, I mean, despite these things, the state is not taking any concrete measures to protect it, except some the areas which is covered under the sixth schedule of the Constitution. So you can see that this critically relates with the question of people, be it be language, be it be religion, be it be the case of tribes in terms of land, forest, water, resources, etc. So you can see there is a critical division between the two. Now most of the tribal people have their own languages, But in the absence of any positive measures to protect and promote their language through school curriculum and other related measures, many tribal languages have become extinct or at the verge of extinction. Now, and so it has been the case of indigenous tribal people of this country. Now, rather than recognizing their distinct identity, their faith, their religious identity, these beliefs are being erased through a state administrative practice of co-opting them into Hindu religious identities. Now, there is an agenda which comes to the fore. Now, the Hindu religious identity is becoming a key in this entire discourse. Why is it a key? It is becoming a key because a long time ago, the second of the heads of RSS, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, after India War, Golwalkar came in and spoke very strongly in his book "We and Our Nationhood Defined," where he says that there are three critical enemies of the Hindus at present in India. So he lists the three as Christians, Muslims, and communists. So whosoever brings in any kind of ideology beyond the margins of Hindu or beyond the ambit of Hindu and Hinduism, they are not to be accepted or welcomed in this nation. That is the idea that Golwalkar laid down in his book. Now, therefore, through all the practicing and theoretical and practical means, there is a subtle measure of encouraging a Hindu Rashtra, and the Uniform Civil Code is a critical part of it. Now, um, you can see that there is a lot of efforts to not only create a uniform civil code, but also there is an effort of uniformization of laws, policies, and practices based on Hindu Rashtra theory, whether it is the engagement or it is into the intrusion into the education system, whether it is the promotion of yoga, whether it is the health practices, whether it is the renaming of cities and towns, whether it is the renaming of various ministries, whether it is, you can see that there is a subtle way, and also there is a eradication and elimination, complete elimination of anything that is progressive. For instance, in 2015, the UGC sent a circular to all the universities in India that the school that has been running on social exclusion and inclusive policies, many of the universities had such schools. So those schools needs to be shut down because in a way that is promoting the idea of Ambedkar, Phule, Periyar, and people like Baba Tilka Maji, Birsa Munda, and all. So that needs to be scrapped. Unless and until such schools remain, this idea of creating a Hindu Rashtra will not be promoted through the academic arena. So you can see how there is a consistent attack on constitution. Dalits across this country has been fighting against the caste system for centuries and not even much before Ambedkar or Phule. You can see a fight which has been initiated through Kabir and Ravidas, and even much before that, Buddha. He fought against the caste system. Unless and until the caste system is demolished, there cannot be an idea of equality. So, uniform civil code, in the name of creating a uniformity, or otherwise, in the name of having a same line of reference, it is in fact expanding the existing parameters of inequality. It is in fact leading and opening the path of establishing a Brahmanical nation, a Brahmana Rashtra. So, in a way, Uniform Civil Code is a direct attack on the constitutional provisions provided by the Constitution. Now, how does it happen? I'll give you one or two examples. Right now, there is a burning issue in India, which has been also raised in the European Parliament, I mean, last week this was raised in the European Parliament. That is of Manipur. What is happening in Manipur? In Manipur, there is a conflict between the tribal Koki community and the non-tribal Meitei community. Now, the attacks have been going on by the Meiteis over the Kukis, and of course, there are few instances of a counterattack on the Meiteis also. But the more is the Kukis have been the big sufferers of it, and they've been attacked in multiple ways. Their worship places, their churches and their institutions have been burned down. Their schools have been burned down. The hospitals have been set on fire. The houses, the lanes, the whole of the villages have been burned down. So you can see, and the government of India is not even speaking at all. Mr. Modi is silent. The BJP government is silent. They do not have any voice. Right now, when the voice came up in the European Parliament, the media houses are saying like, oh, the European people are trying to belittle India. They are trying to humiliate India. These are the kind of reports that's coming out through the mainstream. Where did you go when these attacks were going on? When women were naked paraded? When the cookie man's head was bearded and placed on top of the fencing of their own houses? Where did Indian media go? Why did not they speak against these things? So this is the context what you can see how the uniform civil code is going to come. The attackers are going to be left off when the attackers are from a dominant caste community, where they are from an upper caste group, and the people who are going to suffer are the Adivasis, the indigenous, the Dalits, and definitely the women. Now, this is a very subtle attack on the people who are living in different tribal areas and tribal zones, whether it is a fifth schedule area, whether it's a sixth schedule area, or whether it's the unscheduled tribal area, because many states do not have the fifth and sixth schedule concepts. Even in states like Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka, they don't have a fifth schedule in their zones. So the UCC is basically a brazen attack on the protections and provisions provided by the inherently provided by the Constitution for religious minorities and cultural groups such as the tribes. Moreover, in addition to being linguistic minorities, tribals also have their own religious forms. They have their own indigenous religious practices, and in some states like Nagaland and like Mizoram, they are like in almost like 97-98% Christians. So you can see how this tribal method of governance and indigenous method of governance is under the attack under this UCC. So what I need to make a point is that it is not just the minorities in terms of religion, but the minorities in terms of their identity, their ethnicity. These people are going to be completely erased, whether it is in the fifth schedule, whether it's in the sixth schedule, and all important provisions and all kind of constitutional safeguards provided to the tribal. There is a very critical, movement, Andolan now brought in by the RSS. The RSS is now leading a big movement in the name of protecting tribal culture. They're actually running a movement to delist those tribes who have become Christians. So this is another way how how the air is being blown into this entire phenomenon. So one can see that this is not just something which began in 1947 and stopped somewhere there. In 91, there was also an attempt to bring a uniform civil code in the parliament, but that was dismissed by the parliament itself. You can see in the 70s there were efforts how how legally such efforts could be brought into it. And so there has been consistent efforts from the RSS and its political bodies, because in the 70s there were no BJP, there was the Jansangh, and now since 1980 we see the BJP. Now it is BJP who is doing that. So you can see how it is not only a form to do a sort of a genocide. What we saw in Godhra in 2002, we saw a similar genocide, like a similar attack even before in early 90s. We saw the way the Babri Masjid was put down, demolished. We saw so many of similar things happening one after another parallelly. We right now see the burning of churches. We right now see an attack on tribes. We now right now see an attack on Dalits who have also moved to Christianity, and some of the Dalits who are also moved to Islam, and to a large extent the Dalits who have become Buddhists. So it is a unified attack on the citizenry of this nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goldie, for highlighting this matter and telling us your experiences. Now, moving forward to our next speaker, Leslie Martin, a renowned Dalit human rights activist from India. Leslie's tireless efforts have brought attention to the challenges faced by Dalits in India and needed for the inclusive policies. Mr. Martin, please go ahead and tell us about what you have to say about the Uniform Civil Code.
What I would like to say is already both the speakers have well have spoken. From that point, uh, the need for equity is coming into picture. The gender equity is coming into picture. If we take the discussions around which the UCC is going in, it is bringing in another dimension of kind of a call, which is now sublimely coming out in the picture. So taking on that gender equity essence, I feel that UCC will erode into that picture, because the manner in which the UCC is coming in, as rightly pointed out by Goldie, on identities, the cultures, different cultures that exist in India, different identities that exist in India, different kind of people that are there in India, especially Andaman and Nicobar. There are undocumented, uncontacted tribes are there. So, do you want to bring in UCC to them, or do you want to bring in under one rule for them? It is going to be difficult. And now we are in an enlightened version. As Dalit human rights defender, I see the enlightenment for equity, equity of gender equity. So with that kind of a perception into which we are moving, we are also moving. We are also breaking the different psyche, that thought psyche that around which the gender equity has to be is to be analyzed, has to be analyzed. So that is the kind of thought process we are going into, taking the truth and reconciliation process of South Africa, which is very much needed for gender equity process. So one side we are talking about here gender equality. Based on the gender equality, this process is going to come in, but that is not going to that is going to erode into the space of gender equity, which is coming in into the picture. So with this, I end my. I would like to thank you very much for bringing in this kind of a discourse, and I would like to close my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin. It was clear hearing your thoughts. Now I would like to extend an emotional invitation to Ms. Rimsha Shahid, a research analyst at SARIM, to deliver the concluding remarks to the webinar. Over to you, Rimsha.
Thank you so much, Heman, for inviting me. First, I would like to thank you all for attending today's international webinar on promoting equality, exploring India's Uniform Civil Code in the context of minority rights. As we have had a thoughtful and engaging discussion on the complexities surrounding the Uniform Civil Code, which also known as UCC, and its implication for minority rights and cultural diversity in India. Throughout the webinar, we have examined the objective of the UCC, which proposes a standardized set of laws governing personal matters across religious communities within India, with the intention to promote equality and social cohesion. We have also recognized that while the idea of a uniform code has been debated for 9 decades, it remains a sensitive and crucial topic for the diverse society in India. The constitutional provisions and legal arguments surrounding the UCC have been thoroughly explored with a focus on how it aligns with the principles of secularism as well as with equality and non-discrimination enshrined in the Indian Constitution. We have also acknowledged the importance of upholding these fundamental principles while ensuring that the rights and interests of religious and cultural minorities are protected. The concerns raised by you all during this webinar about the potential impact of the UCC on minority rights have been acknowledged and discussed. It is essential to approach this issue with sensitivity and empathy, recognizing the diversity that the communities in India have and the need to protect the cultural and religious identities of all its citizens. So now moving ahead towards our speakers and their discussion. Our first speaker, Anubhav Singh, eloquently addressed how personal laws grant diverse communities in India their individual rights, also known as personal rights of communities. However, he also expressed concerns that the implementation of the Uniform Civil Code might jeopardize these personal rights, particularly rights such as property inheritance for women, which holds significant importance in ensuring equality within the society. He further said that Article 44 of the Indian Constitution advocates for the state to promote uniformity in the country, but it is argued that the UCC in its current form could potentially infringe upon the personal, religious, and cultural rights of various communities, resulting in violating the structure of doctrine of Indian Constitution, which is quite a grave situation, I guess. In last, he said that the idea behind UCC is simply a political plot rather than any attempt to create an inclusive society. Moving ahead, following Anubhav Singh, Dr. Goldy George underscored that the implementation of the Uniform Civil Code could be perceived as an attack on the secular fabric of Indian constitution and society. He expressed concerns about its potential adverse effects on minority communities, particularly Christian and Muslim minorities, as it may infringe upon the personal rights guaranteed by the Indian Constitution. Dr. George also argued that the primary agenda driving the UCC is women's equality. While the intention of promoting gender equality is commendable, he cautioned that the UCC's one-size-fits-all approach could pose a danger to the personal laws and cultural practices of other religious communities in India. He emphasized that India is a diverse and heterogeneous country, and legal reforms must take into account the distinct identities and traditions of its various communities. And now, with regard to the Manipur incident, Dr. George has mentioned, we really condemn the violence occurred, which clearly shows the status of women in society. It is really crucial to raise a collective voice to ensure safety and respect for all women. Towards our last speaker, was Leslie Martin. After Dr. George's insightful presentation, Leslie Martin highlighted that the implementation of the UCC could erode the inclusivity of society, which is crucial for fostering cohesion among diverse communities. While ensuring gender equity through legal reforms is important, it should not come at the expense of violating other fundamental human rights for sure. Yeah, as we move forward, it is vital to continue these discussions and engage in constructive dialogues to find ways to ensure equality and inclusivity for all. While the UCC aims to create a more equitable legal framework, but although it is essential to address the apprehensions and work collaboratively towards solutions that respect and protect the rights of all communities. So let us remember that the path to progress lies in understanding empathy and a commitment to upholding the principles of equality and justice. We hope that the insights gained from this webinar will contribute to a more nuanced and informed understanding of the complex issues surrounding India's Uniform Civil Code and its impact on minority rights. Once again, thank you all for your active participation and valuable contribution to this webinar. Let us continue our efforts to build a more inclusive and harmonious society for all. Thank you so much again. Over to you, Heman.
Thank you very much, Rimsha, for summarizing it very concisely. We are immensely grateful for our estimated speakers, Goldy M. George, Anubhav Singh, and Leslie Martin, for sharing their invaluable insights with us today. Let us carry their messages for equality, justice, and empowerment in our hearts as we continue to strive for more inclusive society. As we are apart ways today, let us remember that promoting equality is not just one day event but an ongoing journey that requires our collective efforts. SARIM remains committed to this cause and we encourage all of you to stay connected with us as we continue to advocate for the rights of minorities in South Asia and beyond. Thank you once again and have a wonderful day. Let us work together for a brighter and more equitable future. Bye.